What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining. Hope you are having a great one as always. Today we're taking a look at the ThreeZero Megatron figure. Now, this is from the War of Cybertron Siege, the anime that is on Netflix. I honestly just liked him because he's kind of a typical G1-ish looking Megatron, which that's kind of the one I grew up with and liked the most. Now, I know they're coming out with the mini DLX line for the classic Transformers, so I might end up getting Megatron in the smaller format if they end up releasing that. But for now, this was definitely the one I wanted to go with. Now, there are a whole bunch of videos out there of him already, so I don't really want to spend too much time on him. But there are definitely some things that I didn't necessarily like, for lack of a better word. When I initially tried doing the unboxing video of him, I kind of got a little frustrated. It took way longer than I planned, so I scrapped that, and we're just going to do this little review here. Now, for the most part, the figure is amazing. As you can see, he looks pretty darn awesome. We're going to pull him up and get a closer look. But like I said, there were a few things that I don't think were very evident to me when looking at the figure. And then in some of the reviews, I think they kind of glossed over a few things. Now, you'll notice he's open right here. I'll explain that in a bit. But first, I just kind of wanted to get to some of the basic stuff about this big, thick boy right away. Now, he is super, super thick. This guy, I would guess, is probably at least 2 pounds. Maybe closer to 3. He's really, really heavy. Now, the reason I say that, if you do happen to display him on one of the detolfs or anything like that, and he were to happen to take a tumble, you're probably going to crack something. I can almost guarantee it. Also, I would be a little concerned with putting him and any of the other Transformers on the same shelf just because of the weight limits. You might run into some problems there. So that was something that I wasn't really expecting. I knew he was going to be die cast. I figured there'd be a little bit more plastic with him. Bumblebee, for example, most of him is die cast, but he's still pretty light comparatively. This guy, not so much. You could curl him, build up some muscle that way if you want. Definitely got some bulk to him. Now, as far as the actual look of him, one of the other things that I didn't really notice from the photos was just how much weathering was done on the figure. Obviously, you know, you've got the little scratches and stuff in there and kind of the chipping and stuff. But you can even see, like, they've got some weathering paint damage there with the little white scratches on him. There are some good spots where they kind of do, like, in there, and that part's actually covered, but they've got kind of this, almost like a carbon burn mark throughout him. Just kind of gives him, like, a nice beat-up, dusty work, which looks and works fantastically for the anime purposes. I mean, they are in a giant war, so him kind of having that battle damage makes sense. But I did sort of think he was going to be a bit cleaner, just based on the photos that I had initially seen. So that was a little bit depressing. Now, the good thing with that, if they ever do come out with just a straightforward G1, you can get that, and you're going to have two relatively different Megatrons. Now, the other big issue that I had was with his batteries, and that's why this portion here is open. The instructions that they give you are basically awful. There's not really much way to tell what's going on. Pretty much just shows you to pull the battery pack out, which is not really doable. So normally you've got this little pack in here, and it is clipped down into here pretty securely. I will fit that in just a moment. And then this piece is actually covering it. Now, the other thing is it does have two little screws on the back. So you do need a pretty tiny screwdriver to pop those guys open. Not the end of the world, but if you're not expecting it, definitely threw me for a loop. Bumblebee, you just open the head, put in the batteries, and you're good to go. This one took a little bit of effort. Now, as far as getting this part in here, I'm going to try and get a good angle. You can kind of see these little white pieces of plastic there. You're going to end up kind of hooking these guys past that. Those fellas there. So you do have to kind of squeeze it and work the plastic a bit, and to get it out was not easy. I was really, really worried that I was going to break it. So I had to use a ton of force. So much so that I didn't really want to put it back in place, just because I have a feeling it's going to be really hard to actually pop out once I get it back in. And honestly, even just struggling to put it back in, which kind of gives you an idea what I'm talking about. The good thing is I don't mind struggling with this here, because I frequently will tell you that I am kind of dumb. But I know that I'm not the only kind of dumb person in the world. So if I'm having a hard time with this, other people are as well. So take solace in that. You're not alone, people. Wait, maybe. There we go. Got it up and in. Click that in there. And that little part goes on to hold it nice and snug. So it is definitely tricky to get this guy out. Honestly, I'm really not looking forward to trying to remove it again, but I mean, kind of giving it a good yank, and it's really not moving. So if you do get this guy, don't worry if you're trying to pry this off. It is not easy. So don't sweat if you get stuck there. Now, honestly, I had a similar issue with the lights in the eyes. You have to take his head off, which they show you in the instructions. But I didn't really know how tricky it was going to be. I ended up just kind of grabbing it and wobbling it, and eventually it's a ball joint, so it kind of pops out. There you can see the little ball in there, and that kind of locks into that dude. Now, I kind of worry over time that's going to get worn down a little bit, so I don't like doing it, but you know, for now he's nice and snug. I'm probably not going to pop his head off too often, because I don't intend on changing the batteries a whole lot. Now with that, since we are looking at him, I will go ahead and fire up his lights. So he's got that for the chest, which looks awesome. I guess that's more abdomen, but and the eyes, ta-da. Now one of the other tiny issues that I had, it's really not easy for me to get the eyes to work. You kind of got to press almost right in between his eyeballs to actually hit the button. The button of the light is right behind there, so if you just press on like his nose, chin, anything like that, not going to do it. You really kind of got to get up in there. Now that may potentially just be mine. You know, it might be kind of different on each one depending on how everything lines up, but just don't be surprised if you really got to kind of dig in there to get to it. Last little frustration I had was the backpack. I personally am not going to have this on him, just because it's not G1. He's not a tank, so he doesn't really have treads, and if you take it off, he looks more typical to his G1 look. The problem I had, if we can get this guy off, there we go. So you got these two little hooks that go into those little holes there. Now the problem, and there's not really any easy way for them to show this in the picture, but so this whole thing moves quite a bit, and at first you have it kind of locked down like that, and there's literally no way to attach it. Now for me it was really tight at first, and the only movement I got out of it was this way. So again, you know, I'm dumb. I couldn't figure out how to do it. Eventually, from playing with it, I learned that you have to kind of do one of those. Again, not overly complicated by any means, but they don't really show that too well in the actual pictures with the instructions. And it is all of the joints on ThreeZero stuff. They make nice and snug, so it'll hold posing and such, and so it won't just flop around on you. So you do really have to kind of wiggle it. I was thinking I had to move something with this part, but nope. Just kind of got to do that little weird pull down and flip up. And we'll kind of take a quick look at some of the accessories we got with this guy, and that will basically do it. Now, they do give him two of his weapons, which is awesome. This is kind of more the typical blaster that he used to have. One thing that they do that I really, really like, he can hold it in gun form. It's got a nice little handle here, or you can pop that handle out, and it has this cool fancy little peg here so that you can plop it right on his wrist. So that I think is awesome, and I'll probably leave it on him. Now you do also get that option with this, the Fusion Lance. Problem is, it attaches right there. You're basically limited on, you're pretty much always going to have it at a sort of a weird arc when his arm's down. Not the end of the world by any means. I just almost wish it was a little bit smaller. That way I could have it attached to him and have his arm down. Now this one also has some kind of fun little adjustments you can do. So if you do have it attached to his arm, it's got this little handle on it. Just kind of a nice, basic, simple, good-looking one. You can plop that out if you wanted to wield it more like a sword. It's got this fancy one here that just kind of slides right in. I'm not going to plug it in all the way because I'm pulling it out again anyways. And then you also have this one. And this one I actually find pretty cool. In the show, most of their weapons can combine. So this kind of gives you the option to do that as well. Ta-da! So now you can have his giant gun. I forget what they call it. It's got a really crazy name. I know it's the combat system is what the combined weapons are, but I don't remember what they call his combined gun. If you know, put it in the comments. I'll be happy. But honestly, I'm not sure myself. You can take away some of my nerd cred for that one. I won't mind. He does come with a ton of hands, which I'm just going to look at real fast. This one, they are also weathered. Little fist bump action for you. Bloop. There you go. You can see they do some very good weathering on it. Definitely looks like he's seen some action and been in some fights, which I like. Now they kind of do what I like to call gradual posing with his hands, where essentially you have his fist going to fully open in various stages. So right now on him I've got the closed fist. Then you get a slightly open fist with that one. You get the trigger finger, which is slightly more open than the one before. Kind of a fully open, but not fully extended. And then the Wi-Fi high five. Now, one thing that I did find kind of interesting with these, if you've got the RoboCop hot toy, this honestly looks a lot like his hands. I was surprised they didn't just do articulated fingers, but giving you a whole bunch of different options is kind of nice, because then you don't really have to worry about them breaking. They're not as flexible. And honestly, like I said, with the range of hands that they give you, pretty much got one for every situation. Now, for those that are wondering, scale-wise, he's a little bigger than Bumblebee, which is good. They do match up pretty darn well in size, which I like that. Now, of note, Bumblebee in the Transformers movies is actually taller than Bumblebee in like the animated stuff. Scale in Transformers is all over the place, so it's not too surprising. War for Cybertron 1 would probably be about an inch shorter than this guy. So like the G1 mini DLX that's coming out, it's going to be about 6 inches. He'll pretty much hit waist height. If you were going specifically for a War for Cybertron look, you might want to get that one just to kind of scale them up equally. Also, it's G1, so they're going to look very similar. I think the wheel on his back is a little different, and maybe a few other things there, but definitely a good way to go if you wanted to kind of keep them scaled. And real quickly, just to kind of look at some of the mobility he's got, you can kind of go all over the place with him. Unfortunately, not a whole lot of wiggle room in his shoulders, but that's kind of classic Megatron. Also, you don't need to do jumping jacks with him or anything like that, so it doesn't bother me. Legs have a whole lot of movement as well. Double joints in the knees. A whole lot of flexibility on his ankles. You can actually pivot him, I just haven't yet, so the joints are still very, very stiff in that regard. But they do give some flexibility on these little plates there in case you do decide to move those ankles. Now he does come with one of those giant stands that ThreeZero has done with all of their Transformers. I absolutely hate them, but if you do have him standing in something like a DTOLF, you might want to use it just to make sure he is nice and secure. That way you don't have to worry about any sort of fall over or anything of the like. But I definitely like him for pretty much all things considered. Basically a big fan. If I had to kind of give him a number rating, I think Bumblebee is almost as close to a perfect figure as you can get in the grand scheme of it all. Probably like a 9.5 out of 10. There's really not a lot of issues with him. There's some things that could have been cooler, like I would have liked if those headlights lit up, but not terrible. Megatron, I would give a little bit lower of a score just because he's kind of difficult to deal with. Getting the lights going was kind of tricky for me. So I'd probably put him more in like the 8.5, 9 range just because rage. We'll blame it on rage. You lose points for rage, Megatron. Well, that'll about do it for this one. Thank you all so much. As always, I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. We should have Endgame Captain America coming up. I did actually receive him, so it's just a matter of me not being lazy and opening him. And then I've supposedly got a shipment coming from Giant Toy, which once it gets here, that'll be a fun one. So hope you guys tune in next time. Take care.